All right, thank you for coming today. I'm attorney Gloria Allred, and I'm here today with my client Sharon Bialek. And we will give you copies of our statement as soon as the press conference concludes. But it's B-I-A-L-E-K. And Ms. Bialek will speak about her interactions with Mr. Cain during and after she was employed at the Educational Foundation of the National Restaurant Association, the NRA, in Chicago, Illinois, in 1996 and 1997. And I'm also here with my law partner, Nathan Goldberg. Sharon is a registered Republican. Ms. Bialek was born and raised in Chicago and has spent the majority of her life there. She is the mother of a 13-year-old son. She is a college graduate. Prior to working for the foundation for 9 years, she was the co-host of a cooking television show, had worked for 6 years for Revlon as a key account manager, and then as manager and director of corporate development at the Easter Seal Society, where she had received an Outstanding Service Award. Subsequent to her work at the foundation, her jobs have included 5 years at WGN Radio and Marketing and 2.5 years at CBS Radio as Managing Director of Non-Traditional Revenue. For the past 2 years, she has been a full-time homemaker and single mom. In 1996, Ms. Bialek was recruited by a former Easter Seal colleague who was then working at the National Education Foundation to work for the National Restaurant Association Educational Foundation. She was hired for the position of Manager, Industry Relations, as reflected on her business card, which I have. Part of her job was to work on a new initiative called the, quote, Hospitality Business Alliance, end quote, which was implemented to raise funds to provide scholarships to worthy high school students who wish to continue their education in the restaurant industry. She was employed at the foundation from the end of 2006 until mid-2007, at which point she was let go. They told her, among other things, that she had not raised enough money. This made no sense to her, as she had raised more in the short time that she was there than had been raised in prior years. However, the foundation, like most employers, had at-will employment policies, which meant that they could let her go for any reason, so long as the reason was not illegal. Therefore, she had no legal recourse, although she felt that it was unfair. During the time that she worked at the Educational Foundation, she had met Mr. Cain. On at least 3 occasions, during the NRA convention, Mr. Cain was seated next to her during dinners and a lunch where Mr. Cain was the keynote speaker. She had spent a substantial amount of time speaking with him there at the NRA convention, which took place about a month before she was terminated. At the suggestion of her boyfriend, a pediatrician, whom she had dated for 4 years, she reached out to Mr. Cain for help in finding another job. Instead of receiving the help that she had hoped for, Mr. Cain instead decided to provide her with his idea of a stimulus package, which she will describe. We have obtained written statements under oath from the doctor that Ms. Bialek was dating at the time, and from a businessman in the Chicago area who has known Ms. Bialek for 30 years. She told each of them separately, shortly after Mr. Cain's sexual harassment, that Mr. Cain had engaged in sexually inappropriate behavior with her and that she was upset and surprised by his behavior. She told the businessman that Mr. Cain had been aggressive with her. Our client is very brave to have come forward. She will explain why she has decided to do so in her own words. She could have attempted to sell her story, but chose not to do so. She knows that by stepping out into the light, that she will face public scrutiny. We applaud her for her courage. If all of these allegations, by all of the women who have been reported to have made them, are true, then I, for one, am disgusted at Mr. Cain's serial sexual harassment of women, because Mr. Cain, while running for president, is actively lying to Americans, showing disdain for our common sense and intellect, and showing that he could care less about the impact of his behavior on the dignity of these women. It is time to hold politicians to a higher standard. We need to know the truth about those that are running for office. We cannot afford to once again elect someone to office who will ignore the law, take advantage of those without power, and who will abuse the opportunities that the office of the president provides. Enough is enough. We have to fight back. That is what our client is doing here today. And before I introduce her, while we are not handing these out, we do have declarations under penalty of perjury from the two persons that I spoke of, the pediatrician and the businessman. And we have those. And in addition, we will be handing out a copy of her business card at the time, it's blown up copy of her business card when she was with the Educational Foundation of the National Restaurant Association. And now it is my honor to present Sharon Bialek.
I met Mr. Cain while I was employed at the Educational Foundation of the National Restaurant Association. About a month before I was terminated, I interacted with him on several occasions during the 5 days of the NRA convention in Chicago. Mr. Cain sat next to me at Marche Restaurant at dinner. He spoke to me throughout most of this dinner. During the convention, there was also a luncheon at which high school students that had performed well in the industry were honored. Mr. Cain sat next to me at that luncheon and spoke to me extensively. Mr. Cain was the keynote speaker at the luncheon. He was incredibly inspirational. When he sat down, I said to him, "When are you running for president?" The final night of the conference, Mr. Cain sat at a table with me and my boyfriend. He was warm and attentive to both of us, and he invited us to join him at an after party in a suite at the hotel, which we did. I felt very honored to be included in this select gathering. About a month later, I was let go by the foundation. I was devastated. I loved the job and the industry, and in the short time that I had been there, I felt that we were really doing well in terms of fundraising. My boyfriend suggested that I should reach out to Mr. Cain to see if he might be able to help me find another job with the foundation or in some other capacity. He said, "Herman seems to think highly of you. Why don't you contact him and see if you can ask him for some help?" I did. I called Mr. Cain's office and left a message for Mr. Cain. He called me back. I told him that I had been let go, but he said he was unaware of it. I explained that I was going to be visiting my boyfriend's family and would be only a couple hours by train from DC, which is where the NRA had its national office. I asked if we could perhaps meet for coffee. He said that he would, and that I should call once I had firmed up my dates and the arrangements. My boyfriend, since I was unemployed, booked a room for me at the Capitol Hilton, and I called Mr. Cain to let him know my arrival date and that I would be staying at the Capitol Hilton. I asked him, "Well, where do you want to meet?" Well, he suggested the lobby bar. This was in mid-July 1997. I then took the train to Washington, D.C. When I checked into the room, I was shocked. I had a palatial suite, and I said to the bellman, "There's got to be some mistake," but he insisted that there was no mistake. I later found out that Mr. Cain had arranged for the suite, though at the time I thought maybe my boyfriend had tried to surprise me. I met Mr. Cain in the lobby of the bar at the Capitol Hilton at around 6:30 p.m. We had drinks at the hotel, and he asked how I liked my room, which is kind of normal, and I said I was very surprised. I said, "I can't believe it. I've got this great suite. It's gorgeous." Mr. Cain kind of smirked and then said, "I upgraded you." He then took me to an Italian restaurant where we had dinner. During dinner, Mr. Cain looked at me and said, "Why are you here?" I said, "Actually, Herman, my boyfriend, whom you met, suggested that I meet with you, and because he thought you could help me because I really need a job. I was wondering if there's anything available at the state association level, or perhaps if you could speak to someone at the foundation to try to get my job back, perhaps even in a different department." He said, "I'll look into that." While we were driving back to the hotel, he said that he would show me where the National Restaurant Association offices were. He parked the car down the block. I thought that we were going to go into the offices so that he could show me around. At that time, I had on a black pleated skirt, a suit jacket, and a blouse. He had on a suit with his shirt open. But instead of going into the offices, he suddenly reached over and he put his hand on my leg, under my skirt, and reached for my genitals. He also grabbed my head and brought it towards his crotch. I was very, very surprised and very shocked. I said, "What are you doing? You know I have a boyfriend. This isn't what I came here for." Mr. Cain said, "You want a job, right?" I asked him to stop, and he did. I asked him to take me back to my hotel, which he did right away. When I returned to New Jersey, where I was staying with my boyfriend, that Mr. Cain had been, when I returned back to New Jersey, where I was staying, I told my boyfriend Mr. Cain had been very sexually inappropriate with me, and shortly thereafter, I told another friend of mine who has been a mentor the same thing. I didn't tell them the details because, quite frankly, I was very embarrassed that Mr. Cain had been sexually inappropriate to me. The last time that I saw Mr. Cain, actually, was about a month ago. I had been invited to the Tea Party conference sponsored by WIND Chicago Radio in Chicago. I actually didn't know he was going to be there until the night before when my girlfriend told me. I went up to him and asked him, "Do you remember me?" I guess I wanted to see if he was going to be man enough to own up to what he had done some 14 years ago. He acknowledged that he remembered me from the foundation, but he kind of looked uncomfortable, and he said nothing as he was whisked away for his speech by his handlers. During his speech, he had that same infectious presence that we have come to know, and command as he did when I heard him speak for the first time 14 years ago at the NRA. But as I sat there in the audience, I kept wondering to myself, has he done to other women what he had done to me, and whether anyone was going to speak up about it? I really hoped for his sake that, and his candidacy, that mine was an isolated incident, and that he had not exhibited those behaviors with other women. I didn't file a complaint against Mr. Cain as some of the other women did, because I wasn't employed by the foundation when this occurred. But now, I'm coming forward to give a face and a voice to those women who cannot, or for whatever reasons do not wish to come forward, and on behalf of all women who are sexually harassed in the workplace but do not come out of fear of retaliation or in public humiliation. I really didn't want to be here today, and wouldn't have been here if it had not been for the 3 other women who have alleged sexual harassment against Mr. Cain. I want you, Mr. Cain, to come clean. Just admit what you did. Admit you were inappropriate to people. America is in and then move forward. America is in a horrible turmoil, as we all know. We need a leader who can set an example which exemplifies the standards of a good person and moral character. Mr. Cain, I implore you, make this right, so that you and the country can move forward and focus on the real issues at hand. Thank you.
Sharon,